This is 101 Amazing Facts About Australia, written by Jack Goldstein and narrated by Charles King. Introduction. How much do you know about Australia? Whether you have lived there all your life or have simply thought about visiting one day, you'll be fascinated to learn about the land where Christmas means baking hot sun and a barbecue on the beach. From interesting information about the country's history, landmarks, and wildlife to the country's best-known citizens, I'll be taking you through over 100 amazing facts about Australia. So if you're ready, let's begin. Chapter 1. Key Facts and Figures. 1. The country's full title is the Commonwealth of Australia. 2. The capital of Australia is Canberra. Canberra is only the country's 8th largest city, although it is the largest inland, as all 7 larger cities are coastal. 3. Australia was colonized by the British in the late 18th century, and her people celebrate Australia Day on the 26th of January, the day in 1788 when the flag was raised at Sydney Cove, Port Jackson. 4. Originally, the British used the country as a penal colony, sending convicted criminals to the eastern side of the island, never to return home. 5. Australia has 6 states. These are New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, and Western Australia. 6. Australia has a population of almost 25 million and increasing. 7. The currency used in Australia is the Australian dollar, and the country boasts the world's 12th largest economy. 8. It has a GDP of around 1.6 trillion Australian dollars. That's around 1.3 trillion US dollars at the time of writing. 9. Australia's neighboring countries include Indonesia, East Timor, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, New Caledonia, and New Zealand. Although being an island, there are no land borders with any of these. 10. The name Australia comes from the Latin phrase terra australis, which translates as southern land. This was the name Europeans used to describe what at the time was a hypothetical continent in the southern hemisphere. Prior to the 19th century, the country was actually known as New Holland, the name given to it by Dutch explorer Abel Tasman. Chapter 2. Famous Australian Figures. Here are 10 of the most important or most famous figures in Australian history. 11. Dr. David Ronald de May Warren, 1925 to 2010. Invented the flight data recorder, also known as an airplane's black box. Interestingly, black boxes are never black. They are generally painted bright colors such as orange or red, so they can be found easily in the event of a crash. 12. Ned Kelly, 1854-1880, bushranger and outlaw. A bushranger was an escaped convict who used his survival skills to live off the land, hiding in the Australian bush from authorities. Kelly was one of the final bushrangers and was certainly the most famous. He is well known for having worn a suit of bulletproof armor in his final shootout with the police. 13. Eddie Mabo, 1936-1992. Campaigner for indigenous land rights. The British had always applied a legal doctrine known as terra nullius to land ownership in Australia. This translates as nobody's land, and did not recognize indigenous people's claim over the land on which they had lived and farmed for thousands of years. Mabo challenged this, winning a landmark case overturning the doctrine. After his death in 1992, he was awarded the Australian Human Rights Medal, and when his body was taken back to Murray Island, where he had lived most of his life, islanders performed a traditional ceremony normally reserved for the burial of a king, the first time in 80 years it had been seen. 14. Steve Irwin, 1962-2006. Wildlife expert, also known as the crocodile hunter, Irwin's parents founded Australia Zoo, so it was unsurprising that someone who had grown up so close to wildlife would become famous in that field. Much loved for his upbeat presenting style and catchphrase "creaky," it was a shock to the world when Irwin was stabbed in the heart by a stingray when filming a TV series. The wound inflicted was so severe that he bled to death before his crew could get him to a hospital. 15. Robert Burke, 1821-1861, and William John Wills, 1834-1861. Explorers who led an ill-fated expedition across Australia. The vast majority of inland Australia had not been visited by non-Indigenous people, so Burke and Wills aimed to cross from Melbourne in the south of the country to the Gulf of Carpentaria in the north. Although making it almost as far north as they had planned, the return journey was a disaster, plagued by delays and bad weather. 7 men, including Burke and Wills, lost their lives, with only one man, an Irishman called John King, made it back alive. 16. Germaine Greer, 1939. Feminist academic and journalist, one of the major voices of the 20th century's second wave of feminism. Her first book, The Female Eunuch, published in 1970, argued that women were forced to assume submissive roles in society in order to fulfill male fantasies of what being a woman actually meant. 17. Dr. Victor Chang, 1936-1991. Pioneer of modern heart transplantation. Growing up in Hong Kong before beginning his medical studies at the University of Sydney, he went on to establish the National Cardiac Transplant Unit, where his team had an incredible success rate in performing heart transplantations. This, combined with his development of an artificial heart valve, earned him many honors. He tragically died after being shot when a failed extortion attempt against him went wrong. 18. Heath Ledger, 1979-2008. Actor whose life was tragically cut short in his prime, incredible performances in Brokeback Mountain and The Dark Knight convinced many that Ledger was the actor of his generation. Dying of an accidental overdose of prescription drugs, Ledger won many awards posthumously, including an Oscar for his performance as the Joker. 19. Sir Donald Bradman, 1908-2001. Cricket's greatest ever Test batsman. Often referred to as the Don, Bradman's career Test batting average of 99.94 is considered to be one of the major achievements by any sportsman across all disciplines. He captained a post-war Australian tour of England, in which his team remained unbeaten, earning the nickname the Invincibles. 20. Rupert Murdoch, 1931. Media mogul. After acquiring a number of newspapers in Australia and New Zealand in the 1950s and 60s, Murdoch expanded into the UK, taking over the News of the World in 1969 and The Sun shortly afterwards. 5 years later, he moved to New York and expanded into the American market. Although listed here as a famous Australian, Murdoch actually gave up his Australian citizenship in 1985 to become a naturalized citizen of the U.S., a legal requirement before he was allowed to take ownership of a U.S. television network. Chapter 3. General facts. 21. The wattle is the national floral emblem of Australia. It was adopted so in 1912. 22. Australia has an amazing 19 properties inscribed on the World Heritage List, including both cultural and geographical sites. 23. Whereas voting is optional in most Western democracies, Australian law makes it compulsory to vote, although there are plenty of methods of protesting available, should one not want to empower any of the candidates listed. 24. The country has some of the most interesting sounding place names in the world. These include Humpybong, Wool Loom Ulu, End of the World, Ozenkadnuk, and Mount Buggery. 25. Shockingly, it used to be legal to hunt and kill Aborigines. The indigenous people received appalling treatment from the white settlers, something that only recently received an official apology. 26. Aboriginal Australians now only make up around 1.5% of the population. 27. The boomerang is, of course, an invention that Aboriginal Australians brought to the world. And we all know one fact about boomerangs. They're supposed to come back. But that's not actually true. There are in fact 4 types of boomerang that were traditionally used, and only one of them was designed to return to the thrower. 28. Because of the threat of skin cancer, if Australian children do not bring a sun hat to school, they are not allowed to play outside. 29. The Australian city of Melbourne has the largest public tram system in the world. 30. Kangaroo meat can be found at pretty much every butcher shop in Australia. Chapter 4. Geography. 31. Australia is the largest island in the world, covering just under 3 million square miles. 32. It is also the world's smallest continent. 33. Australia is home to a mountain range called the Australian Alps. Incredibly, Australia has more snow cover than Switzerland, although that's by area, not by depth of snow. 34. The island of Tasmania has the cleanest air in the world. 35. Australia is the only continent that is not home to an active volcano. 36. Australia has the lowest population density of any country in the world, just 2 people per square kilometer. 37. Although you might think of much of Australia as a barren desert, vegetation actually covers 91% of the country's land. 38. Anna Creek Station in South Australia is the world's largest cattle station. At 34,000 square miles, it is larger than the entire country of Belgium. 39. Canberra was chosen as the capital of the country supposedly because Sydney and Melbourne couldn't stop arguing about which one should have the honor. 40. The longest straight road in the world can be found in Australia. It is on the Nullarbor Plain, and you can travel some 146 kilometers along it before having to turn your steering wheel. Chapter 5. Landmarks to visit. The following 10 landmarks are considered some of the best places in the country to visit. Any holiday should aim to include at least a few of these. 41. The Great Barrier Reef. Coral reef home to some of the world's most beautiful marine species. Sadly, pollution from humans means that the area covered by the reef is shrinking at an alarming rate. 42. Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock, this amazing landmark stands 348 meters high. This incredible sandstone formation is notable for appearing to change color at different times of the day and year, most notably when it glows red at dawn and sunset. 43. Sydney Opera House, one of the world's most recognizable buildings. The Opera House was formally opened on the 20th October 1973. Although the name suggests a single venue, there are actually a number of stages and rooms which can all host performances, of which there are 1,500 annually, which some 1.2 million people come to see. 44. Sydney Harbour Bridge, an iconic bridge spanning Port Jackson, nicknamed the Coat Hanger, due to its arch-based design. The bridge was completed in 1932 and today carries rail traffic, motor vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians across its longest span of 503 meters. 45. Bondi Beach. Surf, sand, and party on this incredible beach. Situated just a few miles east of the central business district is this sandy paradise, one of the most visited tourist sites in the entire country. The name comes from a similar surrounding Aboriginal word that translates as noise of water breaking over rocks. 46. The Barossa Valley, Australia's equivalent to California's Napa Valley. Some of the best wines in the world are produced here, formed by the North Para River. The valley can be found some 40 miles northeast of Adelaide. 47. The island of Tasmania, an island state of Australia, separated from the mainland by the Bass Strait. Tasmania itself is the 26th largest island in the world and is found roughly 150 miles to the south of the country's southeastern coast. 48. The Kimberley. About the size of California, this northernmost region of Australia is home to breathtaking mountains, canyons, waterfalls, and lakes. With a tropical monsoon climate, the region receives 90% of its rain between November and April, when tornadoes are common and the rivers flood. 49. Kakadu National Park, a fascinating trip through thousands of years of Aboriginal culture. This incredibly beautiful region ironically contains one of the most productive uranium mines in the world. The Ranger Mine, with over 1,700 beautiful species of plant, Kakadu is considered to be one of the most weed-free parks in the world. 50. The 12 Apostles. These limestone stacks off the shore of the Port Campbell National Park make for an impressive tourist attraction. Their proximity ensures stunning photographs from every angle. The name is slightly misleading, however, as due to the ongoing erosion, there are only 8 apostles left, the 9th having collapsed in spectacular style in July 2005. Chapter 6. Australia's People. 51. The average Australian drinks 83 liters of beer every year. 52. More than 25% of people living in Australia today were born in another country. 53. The indigenous people of Australia are generally known as the Aborigines, although that word can mean the indigenous people of any area. They have inhabited the island for at least 40,000 years. 54. More than 80% of adult Australians take part in one or more kinds of gambling. 55. The largest Greek population in the world outside of Greece herself can be found in Melbourne, Australia. 56. Over 80% of the population of Australia live within 60 miles of the coast. To put this in perspective, to reach the middle of Australia from most of the coast, you'd need to travel between 2,000 and 2,500 miles. 57. In 1902, Australia became the second country in the world to give women the vote. 58. Recent statistics have suggested that Australia has the highest percentage of obese people in the world, despite it being a sport-loving nation. 59. With Australia's history as a British penal colony, it is perhaps unsurprising to find out that around 1 in 5 Australians is directly descended from a convicted criminal. 60. Despite the previous fact, Australia is very high on the list of the world's best places to live. It has very low crime rates compared to many other first world nations. And the homicide rate is just 1/5 of that of the USA. Chapter 7. Australia's Most Dangerous Creatures. Here are 10 of the country's most dangerous creatures. If you visit, you'll want to make sure you don't get on the wrong side of any of these. 61. The box jellyfish. It might not look like much, but as naturalists call it, the world's most venomous creature, this is definitely one to avoid. 62. Saltwater crocodile. A pretty obvious addition to this list. The largest of the Australian crocs can easily snap your head right off with one bite of its powerful jaws. 63. The blue-ringed octopus. Even if you saw and identified what bit you, if it was a blue-ringed octopus, you don't stand too much of a chance of survival. Its venom has no known antidote. 64. The taipan. A snake whose insanely powerful venom will kill you in just 30 minutes. Most of them are found more than 30 minutes away from where any antidotes are located. 65. The bull shark. Deadlier even than the great white. This is the kind of beast you don't want to anger when you're catching some sweet waves, dude. 66. The funnel web spider, the deadliest spider in the world. It is common for Australian houses to have a map detailing where any of these spiders are residing on their property. 67. The eastern brown snake. Just to cheer you up, this snake's powerful bite causes diarrhea, dizziness, convulsions, kidney failure, paralysis, cardiac arrest, and death. 68. The common death adder. Its name says it all, really, doesn't it? The adder just happens to be the fastest striking venomous snake in the world. 69. The cone snail. A marine snail with a pretty shell that you'll want to pick up until it fires its venomous harpoon into your finger and kills you. 70. The stonefish. Venomous fish with camouflage so good you might struggle to see it. I'd advise you not go looking for one, however, as the pain from its sting is so bad that many victims have demanded their limbs be amputated. Chapter 8. Wildlife. 71. 20 of the world's 25 most venomous snakes are found in Australia. 72. Mentioned earlier in the landmarks chapter, the incredible Great Barrier Reef is around 1,500 miles long and is technically the world's largest living structure. 73. An amazing 750,000 wild camels roam the Australian desert. 74. A fence was built in the 1880s to keep dingoes, desert dogs, out of the fertile southern areas of the country. The dingo wall, as it is known, is the longest fence in the world. and is twice the length of the Great Wall of China. 75. Australia has between 4 and 8 times as many sheep as it does people. 76. Koalas sleep for 18 hours of every day. This means that in an average 10-year lifespan, a koala will only be awake for 2.5 years. 77. When an English scientist first saw a platypus, not a live specimen of course, he thought the Australians had played a joke on him by sewing a duck's bill onto a rat. 78. If you don't like creepy crawlies, keep away from Australia. There are 1,500 species of Australian spider, 6,000 species of fly, 4,000 species of ant, and 350 different types of termite. 79. There is a myth about the origin of the word kangaroo. Allegedly, a British scientist saw one and was amazed. He turned to a local and asked, "What animal is that?" To which the Aborigine replied, "Kangaroo," which in his language meant, "I don't understand what you're saying." A great story, but sadly it's not true. 80. There really is an animal called a Tasmanian devil. It is a dog-sized carnivorous rodent and has an extremely pungent odor. One can often smell it before seeing it. Chapter 9. Australia is famous for. Here are 10 things that Australia is particularly famous for. 81. Wildlife. From kangaroos to koala bears, deadly spiders and snakes, Australia is home to some incredible animals. 82. Lager. Australian lager brands are amongst the most popular in the world. 83. Barbecues. Outside cooking features high on any Australian social agenda. 84. Vegemite, a yeast extract popular as a breakfast food. 85. Boomerangs, originally an Aboriginal weapon. 86. Surfing. Some of the world's greatest waves can be found on the country's beaches. 87. Cricket. The Ashes series against England is a highlight of the world sporting calendar. 88. Wine. Australian wines are some of the best New World wines that you can buy. 89. Mining. From iron and coal to opal and uranium, Australia exports a huge amount of natural resources to the world. 90. Friendliness. Good day, mate. Chapter 10. The Most Amazing Facts. 91. The reason that the emu and kangaroo can be found on the Australian coat of arms is that you will rarely see those animals walking backwards. The idea is that Australia doesn't retreat in battle. 92. Every morning for 35 years, Sir John Robertson, a 19th century premier of New South Wales, drank half a pint of rum to get himself ready for work. 93. In 2005, the Canberra Parliament banned its security guards from calling people mate. The ban was so unpopular that it only lasted 24 hours. 94. Australia hold the record for the biggest win in an international soccer match. In 2001, they beat America Samoa 31-0. 95. The name Kylie means boomerang in the Aboriginal language. 96. Australia has a public holiday especially to hold a horse race, the Melbourne Cup. 97. Between 1838 and 1902, it was illegal for people to swim on public beaches in the daytime. 98. In 1967, the Prime Minister at the time, Harold Holt, went for a swim at Cheviot Beach. He was never seen again, and his disappearance remains a mystery to this day. 99. Despite mining being responsible for around 15% of the country's GDP, a greater amount of Australia's land is covered by pubs than it is mines. 100. Australia's first police force was made up of 12 of the best-behaved convicts. And finally, 101. In 1954, Bob Hawke got himself an entry in the Guinness Book of World Records for downing 2.5 pints of beer in just 11 seconds. In 1983, he became Prime Minister of Australia.